Thanks everyone for being here today. It's St. Patty's Day, so I would expect everybody to have a green beer at least somewhere later in the day. We'll try to have a little fun today. People ask me all the time. It's like squirrels. What are you doing with squirrels? It's like, yeah, they sort of laugh at you because it seems like a fairly lighthearted situation. But as you'll see as we introduce this topic, it's actually pretty serious business for a lot of utilities. We've been doing this now for 25 years with utilities across the country and, for that matter, around the globe. Um, and they're not letting up. We don't kill them. I do have customers that say, look, you know, it, squirrels are a problem, but not really for us. It's like, yeah, what are you doing? Oh, we shoot them. Well, that typically is frowned upon in most locations. But so no, Critter Guard doesn't shoot them, but we do keep them at bay. So just a couple of quotes to introduce the topic. These are somewhat dated, but they're still as relevant as ever. Gentleman Marcus Sachs, Joint Service Academy Cybersecurity Summit in 2016, said that in their discussions of threats to the grid, and primarily this was supposed to be geared around cyber technology and cyber hackers. They pretty much came to the conclusion it's like, yeah, it's a threat, but squirrels are definitely the number one threat because they're real. They happen in every location. They're geography independent. As Randy mentioned, I've been around the globe in my professional career. Squirrels are everywhere. You don't get rid of them. So, and then John Inglis of the National Security Agency, 2015, had said that the paralysis of the electrical grid is more likely by a cyber attack than by a natural disaster. But frankly, the number one threat is still squirrels. So that's the point is that no matter where you go, no matter what you do, these dastardly little creatures, my wife calls them rats with cuter outfits, but basically you can see there's really not a season that's a high season or a low season. Squirrels don't hibernate. They're active pretty much all year round. And so you can see this trend continue to the present day. CritterGuard maintains an outage tracker. If you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to go look at it, send it to your bosses or shareholders or whoever. We keep it live and up to date every year by basically scrubbing and scouring public news sources across the country and looking at trends and activities and outages. And so a couple of select things I just pulled out for reference. There's many, many more on the website. Go to critterguard.org pages, power outage stats. And if it doesn't come up, just put a search in there and you'll find it. So more than 5 million customers lost power in 2023 as a result of 74,000 individual events. And more than half of those people said the cost of the outage was over $100,000. So it's fun to sort of laugh at and say, yeah, it's just squirrels. But the reality is, if you don't take it seriously, the outage can be very serious. In animal specific stats, in 2023, again, over 7,000 outages caused by squirrels alone. So more than 13 million people lose power to wildlife every year. And at least in the Midwest, that's where I am, 19.2% of the outages are caused by squirrels in 2023, and 2,500 of them by birds. So, a lot of evidence that this is serious stuff. In 2020, recent survey said that a total of 1.3 billion hours of power outage. One in four companies experience an outage at least once a month. And at least with the American Public Power Institute, these are municipals and co-ops and people like that. as opposed to the investor-owned utilities who tend to do their own measurements. But squirrels are the most common cause of outages at public power utilities. They've updated that from time to time, but it clearly shows that, squirrels are number one, rats are number two, and birds are from an avian species. Birds are number one that don't crawl. So um, Entergy, you can see that's Gulf Coast. We've been doing business with them for years and years. Um, More than 15,000 animal related outages. So, it seems like we're gaining on them, but then not really. So it's very expensive business. Estimates of a damage, we saw one, I mean, I didn't see the actual event, but one of the local utilities here literally caught it on film that a squirrel came into the substation and the entire thing went up like a fireworks. They had multiple millions of dollars in just one site of damage. So just really terrible consequences if you don't take this stuff seriously. So what we've seen in the last couple of years is a lot of different amongst our utility customers. Um, we see a lot of different efforts, a lot of names put on them. Everything from grid reliability or resiliency. One utility calls it perfect power. Grid hardening is another term that's used. The motivation to get up to snuff with grid hardening, animal mitigation needs to be part of it. And so if it's not, you're neglecting one of the simplest and yet one of the most effective ways to improve your uptime reliability. So what we're going to do is focus the rest of this presentation on how CritterGuard handles that. You'll see there are dozens of ways to address animal mitigation. Ours is pretty unique. Excuse me. Ours is pretty unique. We take a little bit different approach. We'll get into that in just a minute. Just by way of introduction, show you some examples of what many of you probably already use or have seen around wherever everybody is in these days. But we call these guards. We also call them covers or caps, whatever name you use. You can see that there's a wide variety of what these covers and guards look like. From our perspective, those guards are designed to fit over a device or a specific termination. And because of the voltage ratings of each device and each location, usually the ratings of that particular guard have to be closely understood and to make sense for it from a dielectric perspective. Line guard and pole guard from CritterGuard don't have that problem. And you might say, well, how or why? And the answer is this. We approach this problem from a completely different perspective. Rather than covering or guarding any particular energized device, we basically covered or we block the access to the device rather than covering it. Well, how do you do that? Well, there's one thing that's common amongst every piece of wired equipment, and that is the conductor. So instead of trying to block or cover the device, we blocked the conductor as a highway. So the squirrel just literally can't get to it. And it's not just squirrels, it could be any critter. But anything that crawls along that highway or that conductor can't get past the line guard. Similarly, our pole guard product does the same thing, but from the ground. So if the animal is trying to get to a device overhead, like a transformer, a bushing, a switch, recloser, anything upstairs that's connected on a conductor, he might choose to get there by means of the power pole. And so there's only two ways to get to that device. if you're a crawling animal. And that means you're either going to climb the pole to get to it, or you're going to maybe drop on the line from a tree, a building, or some other access point, and then come down the line. What CritterGuard does with these products is block those access points. It creates basically a virtual overhead fence. So LineGuard ends up being a near universal solution for the overhead line. And so it's called Line Guard as a product. It gives you the feeling that it's guarding the line, but not really. It's actually guarding the assets on the line. And it could be way further down the line. So just like in a highway design, if the highway construction guys are working on a bridge 3 or 5 miles ahead, they'll start moving you over into one line and detour you around or over that bridge so that you're not at risk from the bridge itself. That detour, that block, keeps you from going into the work zone. Line guard does the same thing to a squirrel. It blocks them so they can't get there. So they just give up and go somewhere else. The way it does that is because it's able to, normally it sits there. You don't even pay attention to it. It has zero impact on electrical properties. It's simply a mechanical device. But it moves or spins once the animal engages with it. So that movement frightens the animal, blocks his forward progress, maybe frustrates him a little bit, and he's got to go backwards. He just can't keep going forward because he can't get any footing. So, and then that movement is effective against pretty much all types of crawling animals. Might be a snake, it might be monkeys, certainly possum, squirrels, as I mentioned, are number one. Rats are number two, but small little rodents like mice or chipmunks or even possum, larger animals like possum and raccoon are repelled by this device. So I'm going to switch over here to a video screen. I do this because it tends to be better than trying to embed it in the presentation. Hopefully everybody can see that. So this shows a line guard installed. This was a homeowner's installation. They're better about getting photographs than our utility customers. Once the utility puts it up, they never go back. But the homeowner, he sees this all the time. So in this case, it's not a squirrel. This is a rat. You can tell by the lack of the fluffy tail. But that basic movement, he's coming up, he's curious about that wheel, and he tries to get over it. As he tries to get over it, his own weight spins the wheel, turns him upside down, and he's like, crap, what do I do now? And so it's actually pretty entertaining to watch, but you can see how frustrating it is. So as the video goes on, the rat is back for another attempt. He's bound and determined to cross this thing. And so he tries again. Nope, does the same thing, spins him upside down, but he wants to cross this wheel. And so what he's going to do is now take a running jump at it. And that's why there are 5 rollers. And you see each of those rollers spin independently, and it creates a system of rollers about 5 feet long. I'll go back to the presentation. It creates a system of rollers 5 feet long and basically is voltage independent. That can go on a 3-phase power line, can go on a single-phase power line, can go on a ground wire or a neutral. It can go on actually an unenergized line, like for instance a guy wire on a power pole. So it doesn't even have to be a horizontal line. You'll see later that there's an example of it on a guy wire. So the point being, you can install line guard anywhere on the line between where a critter wants to get and the device. So If the critter comes on at a tree or a building or another pole, and you've got transformers or other powered devices down the line, it doesn't have to be right next to it. It could be, 100 feet away because that's the highway between the squirrel and where he wants to go. So when you block that highway, he can't get there. And so it's just that simple. So you can install this in multiple different ways. It's pretty simple. We have a hotline installation method as well, with a C clamp that can be just hung on the line and then buttoned up with an impact drill or even an eye bolt, so it comes together very quickly. Um, the we In the last year we created a different, actually a couple of years now, we created a different version of it. We created a different version of it so that we can handle what's called triplex lines. The triplex are like cable bundles, maybe two or three or sometimes even four individual conductors twisted together. And you see those a lot in homeowners, service entrance cables into their homes. So those are very popular. And we just made the opening a little bit bigger to handle larger diameter cable bundles. They're primarily for distribution overhead lines, but we've got them installed in a number of transmission applications as well. Known, sometimes customers don't tell us where they've got them, but known is up to 77 kV, and they've been there for years. So there's no technical issues. I tell people all the time, don't think of this like an insulator. When you deal with other products that are fit over and are precisely engineered to fit over a device, you're worried about clearances and air gaps and dielectric constances because you may have, an induced bridge from perhaps a tree or a branch landing across two adjoining phases. You don't have that problem with line guard because they don't have to be next to each other. They can be as far away as you need them to be. So they don't interfere with your air gap spacing on any overhead line. This close up of the new line guard for triplex. You can see it's basically the same system. It just has larger cutback holes for larger cable bundles. And then that shows you a real simple clamp. The key point being it's got to have that smooth face so that when that roller and that wheel spin, it doesn't hang up on the clamp. So that's something we had to do special for that market. Then a switch talked about pole guard. Pole guard does the same thing. It blocks the highway, and in this case, the highway is the usually a wooden power pole, but in many cases, especially overseas, we do a lot of steel and concrete poles. Still have to be circular. We're looking at circular poles. The design criteria is essentially 12-inch diameter is where we want to install it. Since most of these poles taper, that's usually not hard. But what happens is the pole guard blocks the pole. It's not like a sleeve that a squirrel can run right past. It's a physical blockade. So we use these rigid plates that are very sturdy, same materials they make brake liners out of, and they support 7 individual rollers, same kind of rollers you just saw with line guard, and they spin if an animal tries to climb up over that roller because they're approaching it from upside down, and the only way to get over it is to go to the outside, reach up over. That roller spins when they do that. It's a hard plastic. They can't get their claws in it, and they give up. You can't jump it, you can't clear it, so it's a physical blockade. So we use those in a lot of different areas. Um, I got educated by one of our customers that it's especially effective against snakes, and I was a little taken aback. I didn't really know if it would do anything with snakes or not. But in flood season, especially as the people out there in Appalachia and, North and South Carolina, Virginia, that area got swamped with rains, some years ago. In fact, some cases still recovering. The snakes would come out because they're looking for food, and they would go up the power poles that survived. And Duke told us that said, yeah, we love it because they can't get by these things. So that works out great. One more video. Again, I don't have a great uh, customer video for this, so I have to do this way. So I did this on a pecan tree, very popular target for squirrels. And you can see the pole guard fit just perfectly on this particular tree. Now, years later, I had to take it down because the tree kept growing. But you can see they're trying to avoid the dogs as well. And so they want to go up the tree and they can't get there. So they tried all the way around the tree to try to go through that blockade. I don't think this video shows them actually trying to climb over the top, but they had in previous looks, and they just can't get past it. So they finally give up and go away. Sorry, busy day, always the way it is. So that gives you an idea of how pole guard works. Hang on, there we go. So just some examples. This is an example with pole guard and line guard together, line guard in a sort of a non-traditional use. This was at a wastewater treatment plant, and basically the squirrels had found the top of the pole with a lot of equipment up there. The picture cuts that off. But the guy wires were there, and you can see they customer had guy guards on those guy wires, and they still couldn't stop the squirrels. So they put line guard in a non-traditional orientation. Normally it's horizontal. This is almost vertical, and but you can see it's clamped to the line. All those units rotate independently and freely, and then with a pole guard on the pole. This customer never had a single animal outage at that pole since. And before that, they used to have one a month. So that stopped that problem. You see here is an example of pole guard for steel poles. So not just wood. Wood's been a historical product for us. Um, we moved to a steel mounting system. This uses the steel tensioning bands like utilities will use to mount street signs or other pole mounted hardware on a steel or a concrete pole. And you can see a sort of an interesting challenge with a riser conduit next to a standard pole as well. And we were able to modify that. That's a special project, but we were able to modify that. And again, that stopped all the traffic to the top of that pole. So pretty interesting. It's still designed for circular poles. We've had a couple of examples where, with some hexagonal or rectangular type poles, but still with round ends. So we can look at certain things. I'd encourage you, if you have a challenge like that, just send me an email and we'll be happy to talk to you about whether we can make something work or not. We've also tried to deal with poles where the diameters are very small, like for instance, maybe 7 inches. If that's the case, one of the things you can do is you can see this flexible conduit. This is an optional product now with pole guard, and it just wraps around the pole very simply. But it's an inch and a half in diameter, so it fills an inch and a half on each side. That's a 3 inch gap, and so it keeps out any animals where that pole guard might be too big a gap on a small diameter pole, and the animal could go right between the pole and the plates. So that stops that. Again, we have different mounting brackets for steel and concrete, but it's the same basic function. So that's how that works. And then we'll move along to the number two problem child in most utilities for animal damage, and that's birds. Birds are not the same type of a solution as line guard and pole guard because you've probably seen these. They're diverters and spikes and all kinds of things, but by and large, they're sort of hit and miss. They might work or they might not. It just depends on the bird and the location and how it was mounted. So it's pretty much a hit and miss proposition. We created this product a number of years ago. It's been very successful for us called Bird Block. Bird Block is not a mechanical diverter. It's scent based. In other words, it stinks and it's designed to not be attractive to birds. In fact, when they fly into the area that's been treated with bird block, they don't like it. It gives them a headache and they move on. So it does not keep them from landing. It's not a perch deterrent. But what we've seen is when it's hung in a particular area and that scent is prevalent, the bird might land, but then it won't stay there. It flies away. And the scent will last up to several months, and you can hang it real easily. It's just on string. So the birds will check it out, but then they won't like it and they'll move on, which is all you really want to accomplish with a bird. So we have repeat customers in substations, primarily in a lot of the unattended substations, wind and solar and traditional generation plants where there's nobody there. And so, the birds will move in and they'll crap all over everything. That crap will fall down onto transformer pads and control cabinets and bus bars and any number of other sensitive devices. And in a few years, you've got a real problem. And it's tedious. Nobody likes it. You got to go clean it up. That's a job that nobody wants to sign up for. And so Bird Block has really gone a long way towards helping these people out. They just hang it up and they don't have to worry about it anymore. The birds just go elsewhere. So it's a real simple pouch. Each pouch is like 50 grams or 2 ounces of material in a cotton bag, and you just hang it wherever you want to hang it. Depending on what your bird problem is, you might want to hang them fairly concentrated in a particular area because the higher concentration will, number one, last longer, and number two, propagate further. But in any case, the scent trains the birds not to come back. And even when the scent fades, I was at a site that did not replace their bags even after a year. And we went back and stood there, the lineman and I stood there and watched them, sort of congregate. This was a substation right next to a nature preserve, so there's no shortage of birds. And the birds kept flying around, but they never came back. Now, the bags were still hanging there, but they'd effectively, quote unquote, gone off. They'd expired their shelf life. But the birds seem to recognize the bags. It's like, I don't think I like those things. Whether that's a scarecrow effect or a residual scent, we're not really sure. But the bottom line is it kept the birds away. And again, all these products, as I mentioned with line guard, with pole guard, once you put them up, you never go back. There's no maintenance. You don't have to, it doesn't affect your work if you're doing thermography or just visual inspections on some devices to check out the health of a particular device. If line guard is on that line, you don't have to deal with it. You're going to deal with the device, not line guard. So we've had line guard installed on power lines for 25 years, and they're still there. They haven't ever been changed. So the UV protection is great. The mounting mechanism is built for life, and so you shouldn't have any trouble. Back to bird block, we use that all kinds of places. Primarily substations tends to be the biggest use, but we also see them in depots and warehouses, anything with an open bay, like maintenance warehouses. The crew will get ready to make their truck rolls that day, and there may be, two to a half a dozen or more trucks getting loaded up in a high bay garage. And what happens is the birds are flying in and out the whole time, especially this time of year. This is the beginning of nesting season. And so the birds are openly trying to mate up and try to find a place to hatch some eggs. And the top or the uh, top gables of a high bay ceiling is a perfect place to do that. So you hang these up on a nail up in the upper reaches of the building, and it chases them out. They won't come back. So couple of examples here. These are two different substations. The one on the left, big time, that's a nuclear generation station on the East Coast. And you can see the gas-filled phase conductors up there. And he's using a hot stick to get up in there and literally just hang the bag. You don't really see the bag in that view. It's behind the red pipe. But on the right picture is a different substation outdoors. This one's in Oklahoma. And we literally just used the hot stick because the entire station is live. They didn't have to shut it down. And they basically put multiple bags together in one drop to make a stronger scent in one location. And then that made them, because we were recommending about 4 to 5 feet between bags, and they didn't have a closer place to do it. 8 feet was as close as they could get. So we doubled them up, and that worked just great. So now you can hang them on any of the cross structures or support beams in the substation, and the birds didn't show up. So in summary, don't wait for the next animal outage. It's going to happen. Doesn't matter where you are. It could be Canada. It could be, the equator. Animals are everywhere. You know it's going to happen. Critter Guard's distinctly different. We don't treat the problem the same way most other competitors do. We block the highway that leads to these devices. The products are near universal. They're fit for most overhead critical assets, regardless of voltage, and all can be installed hot if desired. And once they're up, you don't need to go back. So we've just really enjoyed that. I thought I bought the company years ago. Company's 25 years old, and I thought when I bought it, with a big risk would be that, well, maybe the market's already saturated because you don't have to replace these things. Turns out, no, they just keep buying more and more and more. So, I mean, the large utilities like AEP and Duke and Entergy I mentioned, we've got dozens more that buy from us each and every year and add to substations and add to overhead lines. And so we just keep it going. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'll turn it back over to Randy, and any questions,
Okay.
I'm happy to take them.
Okay. Thanks very much, John. Good presentation as always. Yeah, I have a few questions. One, why hasn't animal mitigation been treated as a core reliability strategy until now?
That is a great question. I wish I could answer it. I've asked the question of multiple utilities. I will say that part of it is what I'll call organizational. Um, the utility engineers that I've worked with over the last 10 years have been what I'll call a fairly transient group. In other words, they'll receive the title today of animal mitigation expert. They might even be given a subject matter expert title for a strategy for the utility. They may only have that job for 6 months or a year before they're promoted or moved away to another job in the rotation that furthers their technical career. So the lifespan of an animal mitigation utility engineer is not very long from a professional perspective, you know. Secondly, I think that, and a lot of utilities have told me this historically, they really didn't take it seriously, which is why the first part of the presentation says that is like, we don't have that problem. Well, the part of the reason for that is it's actually deniability. Most of the utilities we've spoken with do have that problem and admit to it privately. What they don't want to admit to publicly is they have an animal problem
Hmm.
because their customers, you and me that pay the rate, okay, those customers tend to not be very happy when they find out they lost their power to a stupid squirrel because the attitude is, you mean you guys don't track for that?
Hmm.
And so they get a little egg on their face if they go public with these kinds of notions. So I think that's the biggest two reasons is it's not that they don't believe it. They do believe it. They've been buying it. I mean, the proof is in our results each and every year, which keep growing. And last year it grew significantly. We were just thrilled. And it's like, well, why? What did I do? I wanted to take credit for it. Now I can't take credit for it. It's like, no, this basically the concept of you know grid reliability and resiliency or whatever title you want to put on it has reached a point where people have said, look, it's so cheap compared to some of the other technical presentations you're going to have
Mhm.
that talk about these really high-tech projects and requires a lot of engineering. This doesn't require a lot of engineering or a lot of thought, but it does need to be acted upon and brought to the forefront. And so when it's put in the, I'll say the standards uh, book for utility that says, look, if we go to a site like a substation, or if we're going to expand the network with a new transmission line, and we have even a minuscule chance of an animal outage, we should protect the line with these products because putting them up is chump change in relation to their other work.
Mhm.
So adding a box of these things to their install job is maybe adding 15 minutes per line to the install. And once they've done it, they're like, oh, well, that was easy because then they don't have any outages there anymore.
Yeah, for a while now, I've thought that, reliability and grid hardening are usually, they're popular subjects these days, but, there's all kinds of effective strategies for that for
Well,
hardware and
well, certainly,
software and electrical protection. But what about physical protection?
yeah,
If, you
and
know,
that's why I make the comment at the title of the slide presentation. I mean, we thought when we first started hearing these titles, people were just being funny.
hmm
And then I started talking to some of these individuals, and it's like, no, they actually know this, that squirrels are ubiquitous and they're dastardly little creatures. And so if you don't take it seriously, it's going to happen. And so it's really been great.
Yeah, the next question, poles are this is an effective solution for poles, but what about fences, like substation fences?
Yeah, typically what happens is that most, at least in the US, I believe that, and I'm no expert on this, but I believe that a standard chain link fence is sort of de rigueur or required for US based substations.
Yeah, everywhere
Obviously,
in North America is the same.
that primarily keeps what I'll call two-legged animals out
hmm
of the substation. Certainly, small animals can crawl right through that chain link fence, but you notice all of the in a substation, most of the critical equipment is mounted on the substructure,
hmm
and so it's overhead. And so with the steel beams, there you don't see a lot of that. What we find more often than not, and again, this goes to the animal behavior. Squirrels and similar animals will climb for no other reason than they get better eyesight and they're no longer a threat to another predator or they don't have a predator when they're on the overhead line. When they're on the
hmm
ground, a squirrel is basically defenseless.
hmm
Even with my dogs, the dogs can track them down. So the fence doesn't really offer them too much protection because another rodent can go right through that fence as well. That's why they go up. And so they'll go up a pole or up a tree or whatever because when they're up, then they're protected. They're no longer searched for. And then there's like, okay, now I got to go somewhere. And so just out of curiosity, they'll follow the noise, they'll follow the heat, they'll whatever, and then come down into the substation on one of those poles. And so
Okay.
by blocking both the line and the pole in substations, that's what I mean by the virtual fence. And so we have had a number of customers that have put up tighter weaves the
hmm
first 3 feet all the way around to keep smaller animals out. But of course, they can still crawl it. But
hmm
I haven't heard utilities say that that's our big problem.
hmm
We have a partner company that electrifies that fence. and that works as well to keep animals at bay. But that's an expensive and a risky proposition in a lot of places. So we've just had a lot of success with the substations. And it again, all you're trying to do is frustrate the animal and make it go somewhere else.
Mhm.
So we're not killing them, we're not trapping them, we're not maiming them. So there's no dead bodies to bury.